Hello, welcome to Keg That's YouTube channel. I have recently just made a user upper beer, and I realised that we all tend to have ingredients left over from time to time and don't know what to do with them. But actually, it can be really good if you just throw them all together and make a beer and see what happens. I think we can sometimes forget that homebrewing is supposed to be fun, and it is for fun. You don't have to do it commercially, you're not selling the beer, and as long as you enjoy it, that's the important thing, right? Doing a user upper beer kind of brings us back to that sometimes. And so that's what I'm going to try and help you with today, because as much as I would love to just throw whatever I have into the mash tun, it won't always come out that well. And there's just a few basic things to follow. The most important thing really is, do you have enough base malt to do what you want to do? Now, when I say base malt, it doesn't just have to be some kind of pale malt or lager malt. It can also be Vienna. Vienna is a base malt I rarely see used as a base malt that much, and Munich malt, which can be used. Wheat is it's best not to use it as a base malt, but if you're making a wheat beer in general, it usually is about 50% of the grist, like 50% wheat and 50% pale or lager or something. But with a user upper, it's best to keep it as an adjunct. The vast majority of adjunct malts like cara malts, roasted malts, chocolate malt, torrefied malts, unmalted malts, all those sorts of things usually shouldn't be used more than 10 to 15% of the grain bill. And by that, I mean 10 to 15% each. But of course, it depends what else is going in. So let's say you have 15% chocolate malt and then 15% black malt and then 15% some other like highly roasted malt. That's going to create quite a cloying beer. So it's good to balance these out amongst themselves as well. And a good way to see it is perhaps no more than 20% of these very heavy malts and then no more than 20% of lighter caramel malts, etc. So trying to keep within the ratios of generally no less than 60% of the base malt and then generally no more than 10 to 15% of the adjunct malts. Just throw what you have together. And there may be some times where you might be a few grains off kind of getting what you want. And I guess it's okay to buy an extra kilogram of pale malt or maybe 200 grams of Vienna malt or something, but throw it together. And this is the beer that I had made. So it is 2 kilos of Munich, 355 grams of dextrin malt, 200 grams of Europils, 369 grams of torrefied wheat, 661 grams of naked oats, 87 grams of smoked malt, and 300 grams of chocolate malt. Now, most of those measurements sound kind of like random, but that's because that's what I had left. So I just weighed out what I had left and in it went. The only thing is that with chocolate malt, I probably have had about 800 grams of chocolate malt left. So I only used enough that would make sense in this recipe. So it's kind of a smoked porter. And that's for the malts. For the hops, it helps to use an online calculator such as the Community Grainfather Recipe Builder or something like that to work out things like IBUs and the BU to GU ratio. And in my freezer at any time, I have an awful lot of homegrown hops, so I decided to use some of them and try and clear it out. So trying to get a balance right between the hops and the malts, I used about 100 grams of Fuggles at 60 minutes, but that was actually a mistake. It was only supposed to be 50 grams, but I misread the recipe. And then I used 40 grams of Sriracha Ace at flame out. And then to ferment it, which is going to sound really weird, I had some wheat beer yeast, had a WBO6, a couple of sachets of that. So I threw that in and fermented. I think I did an open ferment. I don't really remember right now. And I just let it ferment and see what happened. Like, there's no other time really I'm going to just throw these random ingredients together and see what happens. I usually have something in my head, as I'm sure you do too, of what you want to make. So it's just really nice to see what the recipe does. So one question that comes up a lot is, I don't want to make a user upper because it doesn't seem like it will be strong enough. I know people who won't have beer which is lower than a certain percentage, and I know people that don't want to have beer if it's higher than a certain percentage. And what I would say is this is a really good opportunity to go out of your comfort zone, and that's what this is all about, because this recipe that I've thrown together and have explained to you now, I would never put these together out of choice in these quantities. Like that's weird. It just sounds weird, but it's out my comfort zone, and it's really interesting. One or two things you can do to control the ABV is make a smaller batch or make a bigger batch if you can. And having a higher mash temperature will mean that the sugars are harder for the yeast to metabolize. So you will have a beer with more body, but the ABV will be lower, and vice versa. So if you want a bit of a stronger beer, you can mash lower, and the beer will be drier, but it will have a slightly higher ABV. That being said, just go for a weaker beer for once, or if you have a stronger beer, share it with some friends. Save it. As long as it's not hop forward and it's more malt based, it will actually get a lot nicer with time if it just sits in a bottle or a keg, if you can spare a keg for a long time. So let's see how it has actually come out. So there we go. I said I did an open ferment. I actually meant the opposite. This was a pressure ferment. I forgot to put a well flock tablet in the boil, so it looks a bit cloudy actually. So it's got a nice head on it, which is sort of stays there for quite a while. It's not entirely black. It's like very, very dark copper with some ruby highlights. And it is, as mentioned, it's a bit cloudy. The aroma it's quite grainy, getting some coffee, maybe a bit of chocolate, bit of burnt to it as well. It does seem like the chocolate malt is a bit more dominant than the other malts, and even the hops. Getting a bit of earthiness from the hops, a bit of woodiness maybe. Oh, this is really interesting. There's quite a few different flavours coming through, and they're well balanced with each other. So it starts off with a sort of a fairly bitter, like a kind of coffee bitter flavour, which leads through to a sort of herby kind of berry flavour, and then goes into more of a, I guess like a grapefruit bitterness or something. But the finish is very long. There's some fruit on the finish. It's quite bitter. There's some more coffee. It's very complex, and there's a lot going on. I think this needs a bit more time for the bitterness to subside a bit. I think the bitterness is a bit on the harsh side. I don't like my beers too bitter. And I think with a bit more time, that bitterness will subside a bit and the other flavours will come through. I am picking up a small bit of smokiness. It's there. I mean, from 87 grams of smoked malt, I wasn't expecting too much, but it is coming through a bit. But interestingly, the phenols and esters from this yeast, which is normally a very flavourful yeast, aren't coming through. And I guess that's because of the nature of the pressure ferment, which would suppress those. It's actually got quite a crisp mouthfeel to it. And this is really nice. I wouldn't normally make this kind of beer and just throw things together, but it's giving me some flavours I never would have expected. So I actually hit my numbers for this one. So the OG was 1041, the FG was 1007, and so it came out at 4.45%, which is a nice session strength, and I could definitely session this. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions about how to use up your ingredients, or you want to say your tips and your experience with just throwing whatever leftovers you have together in a big pot, please do comment below. Do remember to like and subscribe as well. Thank you.